Have you ever had a good practice day where it feels like you've made a lot of progress on a new piece, but when you go back to it the next day, you discover that a lot of it has slipped away and you're kind of back to square one or two again? It's easy to assume that this is just what learning looks like, and that the solution is simply more repetition. But what if the issue isn't how much you practiced or even how you practiced, but when you practiced? Hi, I'm Noah Kageyama. I'm a performance psychologist and Juilliard trained violinist, and I translate research from the performance science literature into practical strategies to help you practice smarter and perform your best when it matters most. In this video, we'll look at a study that compared two groups learning the exact same new material on two different schedules. We'll see what the results suggest about why the same amount of practice can lead to very different amounts of progress depending on the timing of your practice sessions. And I'll share a few specific things you can do to start applying this to your own practice schedule. We know two things from decades of previous research on learning. One, that spacing practice out leads to more effective learning than cramming it all into one long block of practice. And two, that sleep plays a critical role in maximizing learning and retention. A team of French researchers wanted to know what happens when you combine those two things by inserting sleep between spaced out practice sessions. So they recruited 40 participants and split them into two groups. Everyone was then asked to learn the exact same content: 16 word pairs, a foreign vocabulary word and its translation. The only difference between groups was the timing of their study sessions. One group studied at 9 a.m., then came back that same evening at 9 p.m. for a second study session. The other group studied at 9 p.m. and came back the next morning at 9 a.m. for their second study session. Basically, one group had waking hours between sessions, the other group had sleep. The question is, which group would have an advantage? The group that studied when they were fresh and alert in the morning and reviewed the material again in the evening, or the group that studied in the evening and did a review when they woke up the next morning? Well, when the participants came back for that second study session, the group that slept between study sessions remembered more, recalling over 10 out of 16 translations compared to about 7.5 for the wake group. That part probably isn't too surprising, but here's where it gets interesting. Both groups then continued to study the list until they could get all 16 translations correct in a row with 0 mistakes. The sleep group got there much faster and only 3 passes through the list compared to almost 6 for the awake group. So how is it that the sleep group was able to get back to the same level of performance from the previous day in so much less time? You might assume that it's simply because they already knew more words going in, so there was less to relearn. But the researchers checked that. They compared participants from both groups who'd scored about the same on that first recall test, and the sleep group participants still reached perfect performance faster, a little over 3 passes versus a little over 5 passes for the awake group. So sleeping between sessions didn't only enhance retention, but it accelerated their progress the following day too. And this performance gap between the two groups only continued to grow over time. A week later, with no further practice, the sleep group could still recall 15 out of 16 translations, and 60% of them got every single one right. The wake group could only recall about 11, and nobody in that group got a perfect score. 6 months later, the sleep group was still ahead, recalling nearly 9 out of 16 translations correctly, compared to about 3 for the wake group. So that's all very cool, and the direct application for musicians would be something like memorizing music. But would this apply to physical tasks, like getting a shift consistently in tune, or working out some issues in a difficult passage? Well, other research suggests that sleep can enhance learning for motor skills as well. In one study, a team of Japanese researchers had participants learn how to juggle 3 balls and then split them into 2 groups. One group took a 70-minute nap that afternoon, while the other group stayed awake reading or watching videos instead. When tested again that evening, both groups had improved, but the nap group improved by quite a bit more. They were now getting over 3 more catches before a drop than when they began, versus the awake group, which was getting only a little over 1 more catch before a drop. And by the next morning, the nap group had nearly doubled the other group's performance, managing nearly 14 catches before a drop versus only about 7 catches for the awake group. That's pretty remarkable, but could it be that performance improved after a nap simply because the nappers were less fatigued and could concentrate better? The researchers thought about this too, but found no differences between the groups in their ratings of fatigue or concentration. So sleep really did seem to be the primary driver of this effect. So how could you apply the findings of these studies to your own practice schedule? Well, a few things. Thing number 1, when you're working on something new or especially tricky, like a new piece or a passage that's particularly difficult, try spending a little time on this in the evening, even if you already practiced it earlier in the day. And if you're not really an evening practicer or can't because the noise might disturb your neighbors or others you live with, that's okay. Just try some mental repetitions instead. Thing number 2, Be sure to come back to that same material again the next morning, ideally before the rest of your day's activities start competing for your attention. The researchers in the French study found that it wasn't just the sleep that mattered. It was the sleep combined with the morning study session that led to the big difference in retention between the two groups. Thing number 3, nap length. So you might be wondering, how long a nap do you need in order to benefit from this? Well, it's kind of tricky. The type of deeper, slow wave sleep that's tied to this kind of memory benefit might require something closer to an hour, not a quick 15 or 20-minute nap. But the problem with longer naps is that this can lead to sleep inertia, where you end up feeling groggy and out of sorts for a while after waking up. So sandwiching some short practice sessions around your regular night's sleep is probably easier and more practical than trying to schedule your practice around long naps. Besides, the benefit of naps doesn't seem to be universal. In a separate study, researchers found that naps enhanced learning and performance for people who napped regularly, but actually hurt performance for people who weren't used to napping. All this to say, there are individual differences, so if napping isn't really your thing, you certainly don't need to feel any pressure to start. There's nothing more frustrating than putting in a lot of work and watching a chunk of it disappear by your next practice session. And some of that does come down to timing, like we talked about today, but there's much more to it than sleep alone. So I put together a free 7-day email course called Pressure Proof that guides you through some of the most essential practice principles that performers use, like interleaved and deliberate practice, that help each day's practice carry over into tangible progress you can see and hear. The link to sign up is in the description below.